Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Football Teachers. I'm Trevor Lane. You can follow me on Twitter at Trevor_Lane. We've got another quarterback potentially on the move in the NFL. What is it going to mean if Russell Wilson leaves Seattle? My, oh my, this would be major as somebody who has him on a dynasty roster. I'm keeping my fingers crossed and hoping that he does get traded because I want a team that is going to let Russ cook. Finally, all we've heard is that the Seahawks are probably going back to a run-heavy offense next season. Would make a lot of sense for Russell Wilson to want to get out of town and finally be able to really unleash his talents. After all, he is Mr. Unlimited. Oh gosh, I wish he hadn't done that. But Russell Wilson could be a major fantasy asset next season if he is moved. There's already some teams in play, potentially even going to my Dallas Cowboys, although let me just throw some cold water on that one. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It would be amazing for fantasy purposes if he lands in Dallas. So many targets. Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup. This would be fantastic for Russ, but the Cowboys are committed to Dak. Dak hasn't even signed a new deal yet. You can't even do a Dak for Russ swap because of some of the logistics there of making something like that happen. It's very unlikely he winds up with Dallas, but we've got some other teams that Russ could wind up with. It's going to go to Ben Fisher first. Ben, where do you think he goes? Tell us a little bit about a particular place he could land.
Thanks, Trevor. So what a crazy offseason, right? Like with
Awesome.
quarterbacks, we don't see this very awesome. It's pretty spectacular. So my favorite landing spot for him outside of Dallas, at any time the Cowboys, get slighted, I'm on board. So, you know, America's team, my butt. But let's go to Vegas, baby. Let's
I
roll
like
some
it.
craps. Let's throw some deep balls to Henry Ruggs. Uh, Wilson, those dimes to Tyler Lockett, those deep dimes are just absolutely beautiful. Like those are a thing of beauty. When they do that trajectory on like the highlights, and you just see like the laser, like the old school hockey puck
Oh
laser,
yeah.
dropping the dime into Lockett. Henry Ruggs is a dot 16 yards, like Russ to Ruggs all day. And then you still got one of the best tight ends other than Kelsey and Kittle with Darren Waller. You have a good running back in Jacobs. Not that he's a scat back by any means, but he's a solid running back. I want to see him in Vegas. I don't want to see much of John Gruden, but I want to see Russ. I want to see him cook. I want to see him throw those deep balls to Henry Ruggs. And talking about that, I know I just, threw some shade onto the Cowboys, but if he does end up going there, Michael Gallup, baby, all day. His 2 games a year will turn into 5. He's always on my fantasy teams, on my DFS teams, because he has that like A dot crap that always gets there, and he'll get there twice a year. Michael Gallup, Henry Ruggs, let's go. Russell Wilson. I want to see him in Vegas, Trevor.
I think
KO, what do you think?
yeah.
So Russell Wilson, he limited the selection of the Seattle Seahawks, right?
Right.
So he threw out the Saints, he threw out the Bears, he threw out Lane's Cowboys, and
And the
then
Raiders.
Vegas over
Yeah.
here. So out of those teams, where do you think? Where would you want him to go?
Well, I would love to see him with the Saints. I would love to see him in New Orleans. I think you go in there in a great place to play as an offensive player. You hook him up with Sean Payton, who was very good for Drew Brees late in his career. So for Russell Wilson coming in that latter stages of his career to go there to the New Orleans Saints, where they have weapons like Alvin Kamara, like Michael Thomas. You've got an experienced receiver in Emmanuel Sanders. So I think this could
Don't
be
you leave my boy Traquan out of there.
hey,
Get out of here.
hey, I won't leave out your boy Traquan. Sorry, you're right. You got Traquan Smith. I mean, you've got all sorts of weapons for Russ there. This could be a huge comeback year for Michael Thomas, coming off a down year, coming off an injury year. You get Russell Wilson there throwing the ball, get Russell in that new environment. That could be a big incentive for him to even step his game up more. We know he can put up huge fantasy numbers. Like Trevor said, he's a guy you want on a dynasty team because he's still got some years left. He's a guy that's been consistently one of the top quarterbacks in the league when he was with Seattle. He would be leaving some weapons, right? He's leaving DK, he's leaving Lockett, but like Trevor said, they're going to be a little bit more run heavy. So you put him in New Orleans, where they already have a strong running back with Kamara, and he's got weapons there. I would be really excited to see because Drew Brees put up some really good numbers there, obviously, right before he started to kind of fall off toward the end, and he wasn't able to throw the deep balls much anymore, right? Yeah, get the shoulder in there. So
rotate.
I think it would be awesome to see him with the Saints. I agree with everything you said about the Raiders and all that too, but I would just love to see that Saints offense with Russell Wilson. I think that would be a pretty cool thing.
I know you talked about Michael Thomas. I was told he goes by Slant Boy now. Is that correct? Slant Boy?
Hey, you can catch a lot more slants from Russell right there. But I like the deep ball. I like the deep balls to Sanders and Traquan. I think that'll be probably more of an asset, like you said. But I can't. Thomas has to. He was a top receiver a couple years ago. I know he's got some injuries, but he's gotta have a comeback year. Maybe not to where he was, but it'll be pretty cool to see where he goes next year if Russell was there. So
I think it's going to be really interesting if he does go to the Saints, if he gets traded, which we don't even know for sure if he's going to get traded, but if he gets traded and he goes to the Saints, what happens to Michael Thomas's draft stock, right? So many people got burned by him last year, big time, right? Took him in the first round. I think one of us did, right? Mr. Fisher over there took him in the first round of a dynasty draft, burned you, but
guess what I had on every single one of my teams?
Michael Thomas.
Michael Frick.
But how much does his draft stock recover if suddenly it's Russell Wilson throwing the football, right? I think that's going to matter. Not that he's going to go back to being the number one wide receiver off the board, but I think that will in some way mitigate the slide that I'm expecting to see from Michael Thomas on draft boards this next season. I think he'll jump back up a little bit into the mix if Russell Wilson is there throwing in the ball. But you know what, guys? So far, every team we've talked about, the Cowboys, the Saints, the Raiders, I feel like every single one of those teams would actually improve Russell Wilson's fantasy stock, right? He finished as the QB4 last year in PPR. That was because at the beginning of the season, Seattle was letting Russ cook, and then they reined him back in as the season went on and started to run the ball a little bit more, and that's got people a little bit concerned about him for next year, and rightfully so. But this is a guy, a lot of people have said, look, if he was in the Kansas City offense, he'd be putting up Patrick Mahomes numbers because he's ridiculously talented. But what if he goes to Chicago? What if that's the landing spot? He goes and plays for the Bears. Is that an improvement in your mind over staying in Seattle? Because so far the other options that we've talked about, I'd probably have Russ at the very worst in my top 4, but I don't know if I keep him there if he's going to the Bears.
I think that would all depend on, do they franchise A-Rob, right?
Yeah.
Or do they bring in another quality receiver? But if they get rid of A-Rob, and that would be ridiculous. Why would they trade for Russ if they're not going to just go all in, right? So I think there's a two-part there. If they don't, and for whatever reason their general manager is just an idiot, which I hope so as a Lions fan, and they bring in Russ with no receivers, then I think it clearly hurts his fantasy stock. But if you're ranking his places fantasy-wise, Dallas I think is obviously number one, then Seattle. Then I would just say, because of points being scored, would be the Saints, then Vegas, and the Bears, at the same line. But I think Dallas and Seattle are the top two places for Russ fantasy points wise.
So you would rather keep him in Seattle than send him to Vegas?
For fantasy points, yes.
Even with
he's gonna throw, and he's such an efficient passer.
Right.
And with DK out there and Tyler Lockett, they're gonna put up points in the pass game. It's not, they can go more run heavy, but at the end of the day, he's still gonna throw. And being such an efficient passer and an amazing deep ball thrower, if they're running the ball, then safeties are gonna sneak up a little bit, linebackers are gonna sneak up a little bit. He's gonna hit Lockett. He's gonna hit DK deep. Every once in a while, he's going to put up points.
Yeah, see, I could see that, and a lot of it's depend on how the 49ers are, how the division opponents are, because you could have some shootouts with Arizona like we saw this year. The thing that intrigues me about the AFC West, if he was to go to, say, Vegas, you're playing the Chiefs twice a year, right? So you're playing the Chargers twice a year with Herbert. So you could have a lot of opportunities for some shootout-type games, or for some games where you're chasing points. Now that's only, that's 4 to 6 games out of the year. With Denver, you're probably not looking at the same thing, right? So AFC West wise, and I'd have to see the rest of their schedule too. And I know that's only for 1 year, but that's why I would honestly put Vegas right there with Seattle, because I agree with Trevor on their running thing. But you're right. I mean, when they let him throw the ball, he still put up huge numbers. Like Trevor said, he was still the QB4 last year. So
it's not, and honestly, we talked about it pre-show. I have a thing for Denver's offense, and I would love a quarterback there. But I was shocked
Yeah.
that he said, Vegas, because you're sitting in a division with Patrick Mahomes. So you're playing Patrick Mahomes
Right.
twice a year. You're likely not winning that division. So now you're looking to
Right.
get into the playoffs as a wild card. You still play the Chargers, who are probably going to be on everybody's darling list to start the season as a potential wild card, maybe challenging the Chiefs, which I doubt, but a potential wild card with
Right.
Herbert, with their defense being healthy, if they can actually stay healthy for once in their lives. So it's like, I don't know why anybody would go to Vegas. Like, Russ is just going to miss the playoffs every year.
Sure.
I mean, I know we're talking fantasy, and
Right.
we don't care about if
Right.
if a player makes the playoffs or not.
Right.
But
Yeah. Sure.
That's
Real
just
football
smart.
wise, I agree. Like,
and
you're
he's not playing fantasy. I mean, he might be playing fantasy football, but he's going to a
Sure.
team because of real football.
Right.
Sure, exactly. But as far as what we're looking at for fantasy, yeah, I mean, I like that situation when you're
Maybe
gonna be
Sierra
playing
has a
teams that
show.
put up points.
Maybe Sierra's going to get a show in Vegas,
She
right?
might. That's certainly possible.
never
That
know.
could be a draw. And you know what? Look,
That's the thing, right?
let me hit you guys with this. This is what I'm worried about here as far as Russell Wilson staying in Seattle. And if you guys are high on him, I'm sending you guys some trade offers after the show. Okay? Russell Wilson from week 10 on,
No.
when Seattle pulled back, right? When they weren't letting him throw as much. From week 10 on, QB 13. He was so amazing at the beginning of the season that it left him as QB4 overall. I shouldn't be telling you guys this, but he was QB4 overall because he was so amazing at the beginning of the season. But when Seattle went back to that run-heavy offense, Russ went straight down, was no longer putting up those big games again.
Right.
Not even a QB1. He was a QB 13 overall.
Yeah.
From week 10 on. That worries me a little bit, to where I personally would feel more comfortable if he goes somewhere else other than Seattle, because I know their mindset. It's, we want to run the ball first, we want to run the ball second, and then if we absolutely have to, unfortunately, fine, I guess, let's let Russell Wilson throw the football. And that's the reason why he'd want to get out of there too. So personally, I want to see him somewhere else. But you're right, he is so efficient, he might still be able to make it work. I just don't think he can live up to his true potential if he stays with the Seattle Seahawks, fantasy-wise.
Sure. No, I agree with that. I think New Orleans. I mean, it's hard. You never know when with going to and learning a new offense, those type of things. But I just think the Sean Payton factor and getting to a new place. He's been in Seattle for a while now. I just think that, and again, this is now going more real football wise. But I think getting to a new place is going to kind of re-energize him, and that's why I think he could definitely put up better numbers in New Orleans or even Vegas than he could in Seattle. But of course, a lot of it does depend on how Seattle plays it, because we've seen him be one of the top quarterbacks in the league there when they're letting him throw the ball. We've seen him, drop off, like you said, to QB 13, which I didn't realize it was that low at the end. Thanks for the info. But yeah, I mean, that is worrisome. That is worrisome, because it's a what have you done for me lately type of league, right?
Absolutely.
And fantasy football is a what have you done for me lately too.
Quarterbacks are quarterbacks all put up points, right? Like, we are in a throwing league, unless you're Sam Darnold in the NFL, right? So quarterbacks put up points, and you're talking about like from week 13 on. So first part, what was that, Lane?
Week 10.
Week 10 on. Okay. So week 10 and week 12, he put under 20 points. But from week 13 on to the end of the season, he only scored under 20 points once. So while, yes, that's still quarterback 13, he's not killing you. It's not like he's out there ruining your team. He's still putting up viable points to win. Maybe he doesn't have the blow-up games like we saw in weeks 1, 2, and 3, right, where he topped 35 points. But he's not killing you. And second, I'm not taking Russell Wilson. I got Jalen Hurts and Kyler Murray. So you can go take Russell Wilson and enjoy it. But I like, you say quarterback 13, and I understand that's negative, and he's probably going to be drafted above that ADP, but it doesn't kill you. It's going to kill you in a season long when you take him high, and that's what he produces. But if that's your out, like, he's never going to kill you.
Well, and that's my point exactly, right? If you're in a season long and you're taking him as the fifth, maybe sixth quarterback off the board, meaning you're taking him you're probably taking him around 6, right? When there's other positions you could be addressing there and then grabbing a late quarterback. If he stays in Seattle, I'm probably passing over him in season. Here, let's finish with this, guys. Let me throw out some names, and you guys stop me when I hit a guy that you would take Russell Wilson over. Okay?
People don't value Russell Wilson high. I remember like a year or two ago, I took him in like the 10th or 11th round because he was just sitting there. And I'm like, what are people doing?
That's true. If that happens, you do hit a point where you finally just say you take him. But here, all right. So obviously Mahomes, you're taking over Russell Wilson. Obviously Josh Allen, you're taking over him. Kyler, you're taking over him, right? What about Justin Herbert?
I'll take Herbert.
Are we
after
assuming
last year.
we're assuming he stays in Seattle for this?
Assuming he stays in
Right?
Seattle.
Okay. I'd take Herbert.
Okay. And if Deshaun Watson
Wilson.
stays in Houston, I would take Watson.
Wilson.
You would go Wilson over Watson. Okay. Lamar.
And
I would take Watson over Wilson. I'm a big Herbert guy though. So after the last season.
oh,
so,
I love Herbert.
Yeah.
Lamar Jackson.
I would want Lamar for me. See if he has a comeback year.
Fisher.
Yeah. Let's go Lamar.
Okay. Aaron Rodgers. The QB1
Rodgers.
from last year.
Rodgers.
Going Rodgers. Okay.
Yeah.
Tom Brady.
Wilson.
Wilson.
Okay. That's probably about where I would drop it off to. Then we could look at guys like Ryan Tannehill. Then you're looking at Kirk Cousins, the guys who maybe we're talking about.
Whoa. Don't
What?
you leave Hurts out of this.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts is going to get in there too.
I mean, I'm taking Wilson over Hurts. I'm just
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, for
I mean,
sure.
we're getting to a tier to where you would start to take him, but there's a number of guys basically where we're taking ahead of him in season long.
Yeah.
And my opinion is if he lands somewhere else, I think that bumps his name up a little bit into the discussion more, where he'd be
if he
more
lands
of a
at Dallas,
consideration.
like if he hypothetically, if he went to Dallas, like I think you're taking him over. Like in my mind, I said Wilson over Herbert and Wilson over Watson.
Yeah.
So I mean, at that point, if he ran in Dallas, hypothetically speaking, you're putting Mahomes over him. You're putting Kyler Murray over him.
And Josh Allen.
Josh Allen over him just because of the running.
That'd be
But
real
I
close.
think that's
though.
it.
That's about it. Yeah.
I think
That's
then
about it.
you're looking at like, do you think Rodgers, like, what does Green Bay do in the offseason? Like, do they bring in another receiver? If they do, then you're probably leaning Rodgers over just because he hates running it from the 1 yard line. Free Aaron Jones, dog. But, other than that, if he goes there, you're looking at, I think, Wilson way up.
Yeah, I mean, look at what Dak Prescott's done there. If he was, like we said, he's probably not going to Dallas, but if he goes to Dallas, he shoots way up just because, I mean, Dak blows up there. And I think Russell Wilson's a better quarterback than Dak. So, I mean, I think he puts up huge numbers there.
You didn't talk about Dak. What about Dak and Wilson? Who are you taking over? So, Dak stays in Dallas, Wilson stays in Seattle. Are you taking Dak?
Dak.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, I probably would too, even coming off the injury. I think Dak Prescott is a crazy good, underrated fantasy football quarterback. Like for fantasy purposes, he puts up huge numbers. People are sometimes low on him. And draft-wise, Trevor, like you said, I think that's why like a lot of people won't. Like I probably won't get Wilson next year if he goes to a different team, only because somebody's gonna take him fairly early, just because of the kind of the wow factor or the
name.
The name, right? And the same thing with Michael Thomas. I think if Wilson was to go to the Saints, Slant Boy is going to move back up because people are going to be excited about that. So he's probably going to go like before I know I'd be willing to probably take him just because somebody in your 12-team league is going to take those guys early.
Yeah.
And earlier than a lot of us will want to.
I know we're going to get out of here in a minute, and this is another show, but I just want to let this ponder. If you guys are down on Wilson staying in Seattle, does that also mean you're down on DK and Tyler?
Relatively.
I mean, they correlate, right?
I mean, some people were saying mid-season last year that DK is now the number one wide receiver in the NFL.
Right.
I think that is now out the window because of what we saw in the second half from Seattle. But if he's there and he's a value, and we can spend another show getting into value, that's where you're taking him. So I'm not down on them. I'm down on them compared to what we saw at the beginning of the season last year.
Yeah. Lockett was scary bad after he had that huge game in Arizona. I think it was. He did not.
He was.
he did not do much the rest of the year. He had a lot of single-digit PPR games, which is a big red flag. DK, I actually wouldn't drop much, even if they're running a little bit more, because I think DK is going to get those end zone targets and stuff. So DK, I still love a lot, even with them being a little more heavy running game. But Tyler Lockett's a guy that I'm scared. I'd be scared to draft next year. I won't draft him unless he falls, just because I saw too many bad games from him this year. A couple huge ones and a lot of bad ones. Very inconsistent. So,
all right. Well, I think maybe that should be our next show. We'll talk
There you
about
go.
some wide receivers that we are high on, and then maybe we are a little bit lower on him. Then we'll get into a little DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett.
Giddy up.
Yeah. All right, guys. We'll get into some Michael Gallup as well for you, Fisher. But
Oh, no. That was Mr. Giddy himself, Justin Jefferson, He does the giddy when he scores.
Oh, that's who you're
okay.
getting to. Okay, see, I was
Come on.
going Gallup. I'm like, oh, okay, Horace Gallup's giddy up.
I-
All right. See, I was
Listen,
making a
that
different
makes
connection
more
there.
sense, but Justin Jefferson, baby.
Okay, well, now we know. Now
Hey,
we know for sure.
I'm with you on that one, though. Justin Jefferson's going to be absolutely fantastic. But thank you, everybody, for watching. Make sure you do subscribe right here to the Fantasy Football Teachers YouTube channel. And don't forget to ring that
Smash it.
notification bell so you get notified every time we have a new video out. Till next time, everybody. See ya. Stay safe.
Later, guys.
Later.